Before I go too far, I need to acknowledge the President of Craig's Table, Chris Argyle. Thank you for coming. And please don't take too many photos. Firstly, thank you to all of you for attending as well, and to ComCare for letting me be here today. And it's actually quite interesting because I've admired some of these speakers. I'm a groupie of some of these speakers for many years, so it's interesting to be here with them. So we'll begin. Today's reading comes from the Science and Politics of Work Disability Prevention, Chapter 5, authored by Genevieve Grant, and I quote, "The estimated cost of a work injury and illness to the Australian community exceeds $61 billion annually. Efforts to prevent and manage work disability are concentrated in a network of workers' compensation schemes spanning state, territory and federal jurisdictions. The landscape of workers' compensation in Australia is notoriously varied, with 11 distinct schemes and providing some benefits." And I'll add to that, there's only one Craig's Table. A very brief background for me. I arrived here as I arrived here. My work actually started in Adelaide. I became an injured worker in '94. There were no signposts. There was no one to explain what was happening or even why it was happening. In short, and to be polite, it was hell on wheels. I was lost within all of it. I came a computer-generated compensation number. I actually lost my name. For 5 years, I was just a number. I remember I was actually too terrified to do anything, and then I became too terrified to do nothing. There are 3 distinct groups of injured workers. There are those who are simply without strength to do anything, so they just say yes. And you all know these people, they just say yes. They say yes to shut you up and to have you go away. Then there are the ones who I refer to as the angry ants. These are the ones who fight, they bite everything, they argue with everything, they start up very nasty social media campaigns, and they argue constantly. And they're simply hard work, myself included in that one. I can't cope with the angry ants. And then there's Craig's Table, an amazing group of injured worker community who just want betterment for everyone. Not just themselves, but for everyone. They want the claims agents to understand who they are. They want the rehabs to know who they are. They want their families and their friends and their co-workers to know that they are still there. They are just a little bit damaged around the edges. In short, to have a better workers' compensation scheme, we actually need all of us sitting at the same table and coming up with the same solutions that's actually equitable for all of us. Back to my journey. It was 1997 that I received a challenge that sent me on this journey from a man I refer to as the marksman. And he is actually a marksman. And he can still hit you from 100 metres and not even be really looking at you. But he said to me, "If you don't like it, Rosemary, change it." It was a challenge that drove me. I had no idea where I was going to start or what workers' compensation actually looked like at the time, because I was still going through the system myself. I had no idea what workers' compensation should look like. So I did the only intelligent thing I could do. Pre-injury, I had worked in community welfare, social services or whatever they call it these days. So it made sense to me to go back and start there. And, as with Mother Hubbard, I found the cupboard was not just bare, but it was actually not in place. So I moved around to a few other people to get to know this beast that had taken over my life. And this is where I know that luck actually still does come into play. There was this little thing called the International Workers' Compensation Congress that landed in Adelaide. And anyone who knows me knows that if you give me a one-day pass and it's a 10-day conference, I'm going to go to 10 days because I actually needed to learn from these people. I was never going to have this group of people gathered in front of me ever again. I formed some very solid friendships and international connections. And again, they kept telling me, if you're going to change it, Rosemary, it's actually up to you to put your voice forward. So then it came time to test what I call the missing first step. Not just from the workers' compensation process, because by then I actually had a small handle on it, but from what I actually saw happening within the injured worker community, and we are a community. We stretch from one side of Australia to the other, top to bottom. We are here. Oh, and hopefully we're going to go away, but in a nice way. I started reading legislation. This is back in the day, pre-internet. So it meant going to the government library, buying all the legislations and reading them. I didn't know there were so many different legislations. Somewhere in my garage at home I still have the box of them all. I was reading the same legislation that everybody else was reading, but I was seeing something totally different. I was not seeing the system from the injured workers' point of view. For a long time, I actually questioned myself as to why I was seeing hope when others were seeing bleakness and despair. And then it hit me. Quite literally, it hit me. I kept returning to the one component of every legislation right across Australia. The preamble. There's no sections in it. There's just a direction. It's the intention of workers' compensation. It says, return this person to as near as possible to pre-injury status, whether physical, mental, or emotional. Return this person to their community, and then, when possible, return this person to work. It's interesting when you stop looking at the sections of legislation, how you actually find what it means. So, by then I had developed a program of sorts. I really had started to understand what I was meant to be doing, why everyone told me to change it if I didn't like it. So after many false starts, I actually moved my research into an abandoned community centre that I got free of rent for 4 years. So armed with absolutely nothing but a concept, not 1 cent in funding, a lot of animosity from people who didn't like my work because I was actually finding what they were supposed to be doing, and a lot of blind faith, some Irish stubbornness in there. And with countless sleepless nights, I actually started to rebuild from the outside of workers' compensation so we could move into the inside of workers' compensation. As I said, there was opposition, a lot of opposition. My belief is that every injured worker, doesn't matter who they are or what their injuries are, my belief is that every injured worker has the right and the ability to return to work. So I want you to think about that for a little bit. You know, we all have abilities. Whether our abilities are what we had, in my instance, pre-injury, or what I have now, we all have abilities. And we as an industry need to stop focusing on the dis part of disability and go, no, it's a different ability now. So this is the good bit. What if there was a way to short-circuit that return to work process? To return injured workers to the workplace with more skills than they had pre-injury, and in the process, the wider community also gained some real benefits, tangible, and in one case will be seen for many generations to come. What if there was a way for employers to remain engaged with the workers' compensation process, engage with their injured workers, whilst at the same time being able to simply drop in and see what was happening, or have a cup of tea? That happens quite a lot. What if I told you that there was a way for real claims cost to not just be controlled and contained, but in many situations actually reduced? What if I told you there was such a program, and it does exist, and the injured workers have gone through the program, reported considerable reduction in medication, reduction in legal disputes, and reduction in secondary SACALE claims? What if I told you that such a program is 100% focused on the outcome for both the employer and the injured workers, and all of it is set in a 26-week timeframe? Chris has heard me say these words many times, and I'm never going to get sick of saying them. Welcome to Craig's Table. Anywhere we gather, break bread, share a drink, we are actually at Craig's Table. Craig's Table is a community, and you're all part of that community. Craig's Table is focused on everything that an injured worker can do in a supportive, place-based program, always remaining within the community and always remaining within the directions of the medical certificates. Craig's Table focuses on the real skills that are transferable in every workplace, all the time giving injured workers the opportunity to expand their thought process and to understand that they are in charge of how they return to work, be it their pre-injury employer or moving on to a different workplace. And in one instance currently in Craig's Table, we've actually got 3 injured workers looking at setting up their own business. It's a first that I've seen for a long time. The key components of the training which enable the injured workers to understand why they react, how they react, and what they can do to slow down or speed up if need be their reactions, in order to engage in a meaningful way to reduce the amount of angst and stress, and how to engage in meaningful conversations. We all want to have a meaningful conversation with someone and if they don't speak your language, it's not possible. And yes, there are 2 languages in workers' compensation. There is the injured worker language and there is the system language, and they do not translate too easily. In short, the injured workers learn how to become better after everything. They get a better outcome without the anger, without the frustration, and without the possibility of becoming a long-term claimant. All of this and much, much more is wrapped up into community setting. This is important because everything that we do at Craig's Table has to be written into the return injured workers, first to themselves, then to their community, and then to their open workplace. Injured workers are engaged in meaningful work that benefits not just themselves, but their wider community. We have the Craig's Table op shop. We have a community garden. We have the DVD library. We have a computer game lending library. And we now have computer games as well. And oddly enough, we actually have a chook yard. Some great conversations happen while you're leaning over the fence of a chook yard. You actually find out where people's fears really are the most rooted, and then you can work on those fears and remove them. But most of all, in a community setting, we can work on what is next, what is possible, where am I going? On the surface, Craig's table appears to be easy. And in truth, it's very disciplined. Whilst there's always providing time for the space of outbursts of laughter, there's nowhere near enough laughter in workers' compensation. So if you want to laugh, just come to Craig's table, and trust me, within 3 or 4 minutes, someone will have told you a really bad dad joke, or ask you one of those knock-knock jokes that you've heard 1,000 times before, but still, they're still funny. Or if you're really, really lucky, you'll have our 2 Samoans there at the same time, breaking into song. One in the top building, one at the bottom building, and they simply sing to each other. And it's the most amazing feeling just listening to these 2 men singing in their native language. It actually causes goosebumps just listening to it. Craig's table provides something that the injured workers are actually missing in their lives: a place to belong and an identity. They get a T-shirt that says Craig's table, and all of a sudden they're part of where they're meant to be. And you get tears of joy, you get tears of frustration, you get tears of everything, because suddenly they realise somebody wants them. Craig's table builds resilience slowly, but sustainably. And there's some backward steps, there's some sideward steps, there's some standing still steps. And there's some people who say, I'm not going to budge. And then they move. And when they move very quick. And we do things. We have spur-of-the-moment lunches. One of our participants earlier this year celebrated her daughter getting into university. So it was a spontaneous celebration. I don't think I'd seen so much party food arrive from absolutely nowhere as quickly as it did, but it was one hell of a party. The one thing we do constantly is say to them, where are you going? Workers' compensation is a detour. It's not a place to be. It's not a welcoming environment. It's a place to get well and move on. Where are you going? The emotional shifts that some of these people have is beyond the Richter scale. The interesting thing to watch, though, is you'll get people walking in as total strangers and then walking out as best friends. And that can happen within a half an hour. They support each other. They call each other. They text each other. If something's going wrong in one of their worlds, they have the entire Craig's Table community behind them. One of our injured workers came in on a Friday afternoon. I'm never going to forget him. If you've ever seen an angry Scotsman, and Alan was an angry Scotsman. He came in and he said, I need to know what I'm doing on Monday. I need to know. And it was that I need to know, and you're going to tell me right now. So I said to him, Alan, I don't even know what I'm doing for dinner tonight. And he said, I need to know what I'm doing on Monday. Don't worry about your dinner. I need to know what I'm doing on Monday. So I asked him what he'd been doing that day. And he told me. I said, I guess we'll be doing more of that on Monday. And he said, good. See you Monday. He wasn't meant to be there on Monday until 10 o'clock. I got there at 8 o'clock. And Alan was already in the driveway, waiting for me to open the gates. The reason is why is quite simple. He needed to know what he was doing on the on Monday, so he could tell his family and friends on the weekend what he had been doing and what he was going to do on Monday. He had a new story and he wanted to shout it from the rooftops. And on the Monday, he couldn't sleep. So he figured he'd get to work early. I'm not quite sure how he thought he was going to get through the padlock gates, but he was there. And he told us about his weekend. He's still telling people about that weekend. It's amazing to watch him. Didn't you think about Alan? He'd been on the system for close to 5 years, and no one in 5 years had found him a job or found a way for him to even consider going back to work. We had him for less than 12 weeks and we had him employed. That's how easy it really is when you work with them and find out what they want to do. As an outline of what's being achieved, I want to share a brief outline of all of them, but really I can't do that. So I'm just going to pick out a few. We have a car detailer who was sexually assaulted at work, had her arm broken because she kind of resisted the sexual assault, hated people, didn't trust anyone. And she said to me one day when we were talking about where she's going, and she said, I just want to work with bugs. With bugs. Okay. And I like spending time with the chooks and talking to the chooks, but bugs is a little bit different than chooks. So I asked her what bugs she wanted to work with, and she said, oh, you know, the ladybirds and the worms and the caterpillars and the butterflies. And you want to be an entomologist? And she said, whatever that is, as long as it's got bugs involved. She's enrolled to start in TAFE next year to study bugs. Nobody had actually asked her what she wanted to do. It's interesting when you sit down and you listen to their stories and you hear their heart speaking, what you can gain from that. And I know Craig's table is different because we actually have the time to do that. We don't have a half an hour here or an hour there or something. You know, we've got them from, well, supposedly from 10 until 4, but they're actually there from 8 until 6, sometimes 7 o'clock at night. It really is interesting to actually hose them out. Say, please go home, go home. I want to go home and have my dinner, go home. But they don't want to leave. So in closing, I want to remind you that there is no signpost for injured workers. We are standing and then we're broken. And we miss something along the way. We miss to remember that they were people before they were injured. They're still people after they're injured. They're just a little bit dented around the sides. And if you think that an injured worker can't do something, let me tell you a little bit more about me. I have 2 broken shoulders and a compression fracture in my neck. My orthopaedic surgeon told me that I'd be in a wheelchair by the end of 2010 at the latest. When I went for my annual checkup in April, he told me that if he had to write a medical certificate for me, he would put 4 maybe 8 hours a week on that medical certificate. I work a 60 to 80 hour week because I can. And because I know that every injured worker can once they're given the opportunity to do that. So thank you for that. If there's any questions, I'll happily take them.